How do you create a believable character? The first thing to know is that there's really kind of two types of characters. There's your main characters, and there are your secondary characters. And your main character is obviously the one who the story really centers around. And to me, that character is really almost part of the plot. Without that character, your story just doesn't work. So when you are developing your story, you also really have to be developing the main character who's at the center of that story. Now, there are also secondary characters. And the secondary characters are the people who sort of fill out the plot. There are villains, there are best friends, there are the people that you have to interview now and then for a mystery. And they're important in the story. They're not as integral to the plot as your protagonist, but they all serve a very important role. You do end up putting just as much thought into all those secondary characters as you do into your primary character. They're just not necessarily the drivers of the plot that your primary character might be. So once you've created these characters, they should all have these very distinct personalities, and often that personality leads to a very sort of specific way of talking. You might have a character who is joking around all the time, or maybe a character who's poking fun at other people more. You might have a character who is really intelligent and uses really big words all the time. So you find these different ways that characters talk and these different attitudes that they have. And once you sort of have that down and you know how those characters talk, a lot of the time it can be a tremendous amount of fun to just put them together in a scene and see what happens when they converse. And if you've really done a good job of creating your characters, sometimes you can be sort of surprised by where your conversation goes. The same way that when you have a conversation with your friends, it flows very naturally. Hopefully, if you've created really good characters, their conversations will flow naturally as well. What makes dialogue actually work? It's a way for your characters to express themselves. And so if you have created really strong characters who have very strong personalities, that dialogue is going to show off their characters. Exposition is the delivery of information to your reader. There are many different ways to do this, but often we try to do it in the most dynamic and exciting way possible. And so a lot of the time, instead of just telling your audience something, it's fun to find a way to have a character tell it through dialogue. And that's what I try to do when we first meet Murray in Spy School. I had a very important thing I wanted to say about Spy School, but I thought, well, it would be much more fun to have Murray say it in his voice rather than just trying to tell my reader that. So when we first meet Murray and he's first sitting down with Ben, this is what Murray tells him. First thing you need to know about Spy School, it stinks. It has everything you hated about regular middle school. Social cliques, lousy teachers, incompetent administrators, bullies, and on top of that, someone occasionally tries to kill you. So I thought that really important piece of information would be much more fun if it came in Murray's voice than if it came as just me just sort of laying it out there like a piece of information. So here is a little project you can do to try and build characters. Get out a nice sheet of paper and just brainstorm a lot of stuff about the background of that character. You could brainstorm where they grew up and what fascinates them, and even like what kind of ice cream they like or what their favorite food is. And a lot of that might not really end up coming into play in your story, but just having a really good idea of who your character is can really help you figure out how that character is going to speak and how they're going to react to things when you're writing them in your story. So when you're creating characters, you want to create characters that people can relate to, that feel natural and dynamic and interesting. You want to find ways that they speak that differentiates them from other characters that you're writing. And hopefully you'll be able to create characters who are exciting and dynamic enough that when you have a good idea of how they're going to speak, and when you put them in a conversation with other characters, those conversations feel really natural and fun.